And hello, and welcome to another edition of DeSoto In-Depth. This week's edition is our mobile edition because, as you can see, we're not in the usual City Council chamber studio, and we have a treat for you because we have one Matt and two Matts. Matt Carlson, you are the city's Economic Development Director.
Indeed.
And you can shed some light on what's happening in the world of economic development and also talk to us a little bit about Economic Development Week, which will be on us the week of following week. I think May 5th through the 9th, was it?
Next Monday through Friday is a nationally celebrated week for economic development. Really meant to highlight, it was begun in 2016 by the International Economic Development Council. That's a week of highlighting economic development professionals and the organizations in their communities. Letting people know that we do a lot in terms of programs and best practices that positively impact our communities.
That's a big bill to fill because if you don't have economic development in a community, it's tough to keep that community together.
You know, there's an adage in our business that says if you aren't growing, you're dying. And that really is true. You look at stagnant communities, you know, probably the best example of one of those was Detroit. If you roll back 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago to the heyday of the automobile in Detroit, you had a thriving city that was vibrant and brought all kinds of opportunity. And as manufacturing shipped offshore and as auto trade changed, that city virtually died. And it's coming back. But you know what? That went through a whole process of growth and then death and now back up again.
And we talk about the Rust Belt. You'll have
same thing.
Detroit, Cleveland,
Pittsburgh,
elements of Chicago.
Yep.
And
you always have to work Chicago in.
You know, when I talk about Chicago, it probably puts me in a very good frame of mind, except during winter or summer.
Or spring or fall.
Or any late playoff series where the Cubs or Sox are playing.
Because that's spring and fall. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
There's a theme here, Matt.
But there is, but you do have to make sure that the economic development is constant and it fits the bill. Tell us a little more about the international nature. You know, this is an international observation of Economic Development Week, so it's not just in DeSoto or the United States. This is something that people maybe take for granted.
Well, you know, economic development, just as the world is no longer divided and secular, we work in a worldwide economy. It didn't used to be that way. It isn't all very far back that you found that you had much different economies around the world. Today, in an age of information, you know, we trade data, we trade information in a blink of an eye. And so what we do here impacts others, and what we do overseas in Europe or in Asia or the mid-continent all change and affect us every day. So how we address economic development matters. You know, we recruit companies from overseas. I spend a fair amount of time in the summertime of the year in the foreign direct investment world, looking at companies who are coming to the United States from overseas. And just as we approach economic development here as selling Texas and then selling Dallas and then selling DeSoto, or really even the Southern Crescent and then DeSoto, it's much the same way on the world scene in that we're looking at what are those organizations who would like to locate into the U.S. market, into the North American continent in some cases, and what are the best places for them? And we think about it at that global scale. So certainly, you know, I have colleagues around the world that we visit with and talk with, reach out to if we have somebody who's interested in exporting. Many times, one of my colleagues or even myself will have contacts in Brazil or in Costa Rica or whatever those markets are that they want to enter into, that we can establish those connections.
And it's not just there's a good market with a demand for perhaps their products here. Currency fluctuates. I think it was Ford when they built their, I want to say their Focus Mobile, the vehicle, they found that if they set up manufacturing in several different countries, they could shift the operations to whichever country gave them the most bang for the buck and then shift back to another.
You can, absolutely. I mean, currency isn't always the money portion of it. Sometimes it's the trade portion as well.
So by your peers, you might be judged as a very good professional who's on the top of your game. But by the average citizen, whether it's in DeSoto or any other city you worked in, if you're missing a certain restaurant or a certain grocery store and you don't have plans to bring it anytime soon, they'll write you off.
I guess that's true, Matt. But you know, the fact of the matter is, I'm fond of reminding people when we talk about economic development, that isn't economic development. It just isn't. It isn't bringing a specific thing to a specific place at a specific time. Economic development is a process that we engage in, and we stay in the game all the time, because if you don't, when you want to have an impact, you can't. And the other thing is, we don't build the business, we don't build the land. Developers do that, and companies choose to place their products in a particular space and time based on a number of different factors that we don't necessarily impact. So as much as I think many people think that economic development is, I want a Wendy's and I want it on this corner, it has very little to do with what we do. Our role really, if you will, and our mission, if you will, is to create an environment that's conducive to attracting business, to growing jobs, and diversifying the tax base.
And you're using a formula that they're using in cities throughout not only the United States, but the neighbors we were just talking about, the European countries.
Correct.
You have to create the conditions for a company to want to come here, and you probably have to show them certain things about our residents and our habits that would make it worth their while.
Well, behind us is a banner that we use at trade shows often that talks about our median income. It talks about our population. It talks about our location, our geographic location. You know, we take for granted where DeSoto is. Most people know Texas and most people know Dallas, but sometimes we even have to remind, when we're at a foreign direct investment conference, sometimes we have to remind them which state we're in and what part of that state, especially one as big as Texas. So yeah, you're right. It's a matter of telling people who we are and talking to them. It's really selling DeSoto. And every one of those companies that we talk to has their own thinking, their own formulaic way of deciding where they're going to go next, whether it's workforce, whether it's capital investment, whether it's a supply chain issue. Sometimes it's something as simple as our CEO has a vacation home in that community, and we're going to move our company there. That's as good a reason as any.
And the proximity to Dallas. I noticed that's a lot on this banner, that if you think about it, it's probably easier to get to many areas of Dallas from DeSoto than it is from other parts of the region because of traffic and our proximity to expressways.
You're absolutely right. You know, we sit at the crotch, if you will, of 35, 45, 35, and 20. We're in that combination, and that puts us on or near, within a couple of miles, of about 80% of the United States in a day and a half.
That's very good access, and I hope people out there, if they hear that and have a friend who owns a corporation and wants a good deal on a summer home, that maybe we could talk.
Well, it's little wonder that the DFW Metroplex is growing so quickly, and it's no wonder that the Southern Crescent, that I-20 forms south of the Trinity, south of Dallas, is so attractive to logistics and transportation companies because of that access. You know, DeSoto was a logistics area before logistics was cool. It has been for 40 years. And our industrial park today is about 50% logistics and 50% manufacturing, because our product is aging and manufacturers are finding homes there more often now than logistics, because our neighbors in Lancaster are putting up such large logistics parks that they're better suited for these new mega distribution centers, the 3PLs, the third-party distribution. Those all are very much attracted still to Southern Dallas because of that location.
Now, we've been talking about bigger businesses, corporations, recognizable chains. However, the percentage of businesses you have in any city, there's going to be a lot of small businesses.
Sure.
And what are we doing here in DeSoto to encourage small business?
Well, you know, the fact of the matter is we really work on sort of 4 pillars, if you will. You know, we work to attract industry, and that's focused at specific industry groups, and there's a way that we work with those. And we look at business retention and expansion, working with our businesses that exist, because it's much easier to help a business to expand than it is to recruit a new business. And then we help small businesses as well as working on workforce development. Those are sort of the 4 pillars of economic development. And you mentioned small businesses, and we're no different than most communities. About 80% of businesses in most communities in the United States are made up of small businesses. Of all the businesses that are there, about 80% of them are small businesses, and we classify, as does the Small Business Administration, a small business of 10 people or less with a revenue of less than $2 million. So these are relatively small businesses. They aren't even one off, two off, you know, just a couple of folks type of working out of the garage. Those 2 are included. In DeSoto alone, we have about 1,600 of those businesses.
And I know that in the past we've had at least the then-time small business administrator for our region would come to DeSoto, and he would like it because he saw that we were doing the type of things that his clients, the small businesses of the region, were needed to do.
Sure. Well, you know, we work very hard to make sure that small businesses have a better than even chance of succeeding. And one of the 2 things that small businesses oftentimes don't have or fall short of is funding, capital source, and the second thing is education. You know, they know what they know about the product or the business that they're in, but oftentimes growing a business to scale from that ideation to a formulation to a growth mode is much more difficult when you have to start thinking about all the things that come with employment and come with tax filings and come with marketing and sales. Those are all not necessarily the realm of many business founders. And so making sure that they have access to educational systems that help them with that. We do that through the Dallas Entrepreneur Center. We contract with the DEC to be able to assist businesses at any point. If it's just an idea in your head, the Big Idea program that they have, the cohort that's starting in 2 weeks here in DeSoto, it's free to our citizens. It's free to our small businesses to participate. Sign up for these, and they walk you through, here's how you get from ideation to a product to a market. But in every scale and every formulated phase, they are assisting companies, and we really are happy about that participation with them because we think these are people who this is what they do every day, all day. It's no cost to our small businesses. We're covering that cost of participation. We have a representative from the DEC here 2 days a week who are here to answer their questions, but they also have access to all of the information and facilities there at Redbird that the DEC just opened, a 25,000 square foot shared office space.
Amazing.
It's an amazing opportunity. It really is. And you know, we also work with Dallas College. The Start, Pivot, Grow program that Dallas College has partnered with, funded by UPS and Goldman Sachs, again, allows for our small businesses to participate in a 5-day boot camp. It's online, an hour each day for 5 days to help you work through the business planning process to decide, do I have a business to start? And assuming that you get through that and you're still eager, there's a 10-week program online, again, that allows people to work through getting their product, their business up and running. Those are just a few of the resources that are available, but all of those resources are available at no cost to our small businesses here in DeSoto. And all you got to do is give us a call at the Economic Development Office. We'll point you in the right direction.
So that's one of the ways we attract and possibly retain our businesses. Am I missing anything in terms of maybe retaining and expanding?
Well, I think about, sort of we work in very different businesses, and retention oftentimes looks at sort of helping once you get those businesses located grow. Small businesses need a whole different level of engagement and a whole different level of resources. And so we work very closely with them to help get those up and running, looking at all the various different issues. Retention is one of those where we have an entire program that's built at understanding who's here, understanding what their current needs are, if they have future needs identified, being able to pair resources with them. One of the folks in our team, Rhonda Faulkner, this is a program that she babysits every single day and is reaching out to get to know new businesses. This week is Small Business Week. Next week is Economic Development Week. But the Small Business Week portion, from the state to the region down to our local economic developers, want our small businesses to raise their hand. Tell us they're here. Give us that shout out. Let us help you promote your businesses. That's what we do. At the Economic Development Office, we're engaged in helping our small businesses grow. We're engaged in helping our existing businesses grow. Oftentimes that looks like hiring issues. That looks like maybe expansion issues. What opportunities are available in the market? We have about roughly 300,000 square feet of space available today in our industrial park. There's another large piece of that I don't count into that because it's a single block. But if businesses are looking to grow and they're not sure where to start looking, we'll pair them up with potential commercial brokers to help them find those spaces and get themselves situated. And remember, we've talked about all three of these: attraction, growth, and small businesses. Not once have we talked about incentives.
Well,
we've just talked about those programs and those opportunities to help businesses stand up and grow. Because as much as many people want to criticize economic development for offering incentives, incentives are not a good tool unless you have a great project to start with, and it only makes a good project better.
So under what circumstances might we help with incentives? And it may just be matchmaking. It might be connecting someone to incentives. Maybe they're not ours.
In many cases they aren't, although Texas is a state where incentives are typically driven from the bottom up, not the state down. In most of the states that I've worked in, and in fact most other states in the United States, drive their incentives from the state level. Texas does not. We have a great relationship with the Governor's Office of Economic Development. We lean heavily on them when we're doing international and national recruiting, because they do have programs to help us. But most of incentives come from the ground up, from the local economies. And what makes a good project for us that we would consider incentives for are those industries that are aimed at our target industries. We have strategically pointed our economic development efforts at future growth in this community and in the Metroplex. We're focusing on future industries, future-faced industries, aviation and avionics, aerospace, bio-life sciences. How do we jump? The single largest source of workers in DeSoto today is healthcare. We have more healthcare workers than any other industry sector in DeSoto today. What we don't have is those jobs. And those people leave our community every morning and come back every night, in many, many thousands of them. What we hope to do is to bring those jobs here through some of our industry recruiting efforts to create those areas where the jobs then create. And if we need to engage with incentives to bring those kinds of industries, that's where we like to consider those.
And there's a project underway we'll talk about in a little bit, but when it involves medical, we actually are building what you would call a medical district. Are there any success stories that you might have of businesses that we've worked with to provide incentives and perhaps keep residents here?
Well, not around the medical industries yet. I mean, the medical district that we have proposed is part of the Hampton Road corridor. and that will come to fruition. But not long ago, in that same area, we supported the rehabilitation center.
Exactly.
Methodist Hospital's rehabilitation was a project that was supported by incentives. It's a 100-bed rehab hospital that is 100% occupied all the time. It's that in demand because there are two centers in the DFW region, ours being one of them, who offer some very, very specific procedures that are offered at that facility and only one other in the entire Metroplex. So yeah, that grew jobs. I think there's a total of about 115 jobs at that facility. That grew jobs, that kept people here. Another example of that, although it's not immediately in DeSoto, was a year ago, UT Southwest opened their clinic over at the Redbird Mall. And as part of a consortium of economic developers, we put together a job fair for healthcare workers. They were trying to fill approximately 750 positions in that center. We had 2,500 people show up at that job fair. And of those 2,500, 80% of them came from Southern Dallas. People want to work close to home. They don't want to get on the road and commute for an hour. So we're working hard to make sure that we're building for the future to put jobs in our community that people don't have to.
Are there any current economic development initiatives that are underway in DeSoto, and how do we expect them to impact both our businesses and our residents?
Well, again, economic development is that, keep in mind, economic development is a process. And so what we're working on today likely began 2 years ago. And what we're working on for tomorrow won't show that fruit for another couple of years. So when we talk about the big projects that we're looking at, most recently we've started to see some retailers coming online on the Beltline corridor. It's a natural place for our retail to be developing today. But remember, those projects have been happening for 2 years, just trying to get entitled and built. But going forward, there are 4 major projects that we anticipate that will impact DeSoto for many, many years to come. One of those is our Bio-Life Science Innovation Corridor at the northwest corner of town, the Hampton Road Corridor, which we've spent many, many years and most recently many, many meetings talking about and bringing to fruition. That 1 mile of space along Hampton Road from Pleasant Run down to Beltline, and developing that as kind of our downtown.
Which we don't have.
We don't have a downtown.
Realize that.
Yeah, right? So the idea is to develop that into our downtown. That's a project that'll be a decade in the making. We think about major projects in there that'll help to boost it, but it'll take many years to get those places redeveloped. Another area that we're talking about and working hard to find the right players to bring to fruition is on the I-35 corridor between Beltline and Parkerville. It's kind of the last great assemblage, if you will, that has very much the opportunity to be a retail-focused environment in DeSoto. We don't have the land mass to do that anywhere else. And what we envision there isn't just a big box center, because big box centers aren't very successful anymore. All of the big box players have downscaled their product into a much smaller prototype. What we envision there is much more of what we call an entertainment district. And there'll be retail there, but likely it'll be a very different kind of more boutique, high-end retail that is focused on being a part of that district that offers performing arts, that has the ability to come and stay for a day or 2 or 3 and engage you through a number of entertainment environments and eateries and the retail and the commercial office space that goes with that, the multifamily space that goes with that. Imagine if we were to have a 2,500 seat theater there, that we could put on concerts there. We could have major concerts from across the nation playing in that civic center. That's a great size. It's not so large as to be competing with Irving and other areas, but there's no project like that in Southern Dallas. There isn't any. And so we can't serve small conventions. We can't serve those size of concerts. That would be a game changer for us, and that's the kind of thing we're trying to develop there. So that's kind of our third big project, if you will, is the entertainment district. And the last one is what we call our sports medicine and athletic conference or area project. And it really is taking advantage of a huge investment this city is making with its new natatorium.
Exactly.
We break ground on that next month. You know, think about how long we've been talking about it, and we're finally going to put a spade in the ground and begin moving dirt for a project that'll be instrumental in developing the south end of our town. And the city's making a huge investment in 150 acres there. And we envision being able to position next to that private enterprise, sports medicine, sports training, you know, D1 training kind of opportunities that start to capture our young athletes at the AAU level and all the way through middle school, high school competition onto semi-pro and professionals, helping them to train to be the best of the best. We know we produce great athletes.
Oh, you can't swing your arms without hitting a former professional or current professional athlete.
It's true.
In DeSoto.
And where do they go to train today? North. We want to change that. We think that we can create those kinds of facilities that will better utilize the city facility and increase the opportunity and provide the medicine that's necessary as they strengthen and train, as they're injured and they need rehab, physical rehab. Then we think that that's a great opportunity. And we've begun discussions with those folks, the Baylor White Scott and Scott White and the other economic or health providers. Think about the star that's up in the Arlington area.
Yeah.
Think about the star and what it has to offer. If we were to put that here in DeSoto, what would that offer for our athletes in the Southern Crescent?
And they wouldn't have a killer commute to make.
That's exactly right. That's the reason we make that our fourth project. We believe that the private sector paired with the public sector, much as we're going to do in the Hampton Road corridor, will be extremely successful.
Now, we talked about how with economic development, you follow certain formulas. And with the development of, and I'll turn it to to Hampton Road, unless you have anything you want to recap there, to talk a little bit about Hampton Road and the character code. That seems to be the subject of a lot of conversation, but just breaking it down so people just understand the basics.
Yeah, let me jump back for just a second.
Sure.
And that is, you talk about that we follow formula. Not really. We follow others' formulas. You know, every company has their way of viewing a market. And it's our job to engage with the developers and to engage with the companies themselves and their broker representatives to better understand their needs so that we can help to shape our development process in DeSoto. And the Hampton Road corridor is one of those. So are our development ordinances. So is our comp plan. I mean, those are all places we engage to help to shape what development's going to happen so that we're more attractive to these companies who are looking.
Because we listen and we know what their needs are and
That's
what
right.
they're looking for. And if that's provided as part of our plan, as part of our future plans, it makes us more attractive. It puts us on their radar.
Well, it doesn't just make us more attractive, it makes us viable. You know, today we're doing a lot of work around franchise development because a lot of smaller concepts are working towards developing in a franchised environment. It's a much more economical way for a new concept to grow and scale fast. The single largest impediment we face is not having new places to put those concepts. There simply isn't enough development happening. So convincing developers that they want to develop in a rising interest rate and a rising cost environment for a small company who's unproven, those two tend to mismatch. So we oftentimes have to help be a matchmaker. Hampton Road, if you think about what's going on where Chick-fil-A is and the THR facility, the new healthcare facility, and the new Starbucks that are right there at Westmoreland and Beltline. If you think of that on steroids, you're talking about Hampton Road. You're creating this co-tenancy that's super important to businesses. Chick-fil-A doesn't want to be off by itself. It wants to be where there's lots of other stuff going on. Same thing with Starbucks. Same things with Salata or any of these franchises that we talk about. That's not any different really than if you start to talk to developers for housing, they want to be near those same amenities. And when you start to think of development in a much broader sense, not a parcel by parcel development, but a region by region development, you become most successful. Hampton Road and the character-based code is visionary. You can't call it anything less than that. This community's been working on it for 20 years to create this downtown area and to craft this vision and to cast that vision, to do vision casting, if you will, that enables us to think way beyond what sits there today. It's easy if you're sitting there today to say, wait just a minute. This is the ground shifting underneath me. And in fact, in many ways, it kind of is, right? Well, that shouldn't be all that scary because the land you're sitting on is going to be just exactly what it is today if that's what you want. If you don't want to change, don't change. Others will. And in fact, it's kind of surprising how many landowners have come forward and said, hey, I love what we're doing here because I get to do new things with my property that I never dreamed I could because you're going to bring the things that will make me successful that I never had before.
And what we might think might be competition for a business actually might be something that they are seeking. People, they know their formulas, they know who they work well with, and maybe a hamburger place does really well to have a healthy option nearby.
You're absolutely spot on. And we don't try to second guess that. We're not smart enough to do that. They know where they're successful. Every store that a company opens, they measure and is scrutinized to see what made it successful or what made it unsuccessful so they don't repeat it again. You know, when a company comes to you and tells you they want to open a store in your town, believe me when I tell you they have spent months considering that option. They had lots of options, and if they're coming to talk to you about your dirt, they know it's going to be successful. Second guessing them is pure folly. They know what it will take to make them successful. So when they begin to ask those things of us, we should listen very intently. And if we really think that we want those kinds of businesses, then we should respond accordingly.
Matt, this is fascinating. We've covered so much ground in a limited time.
We always do.
We've gone a little over time, but I want to give you a chance for a closing thought, keeping in mind we started out talking about Economic Development Week and everything that's going on in DeSoto. What do you want to leave our viewers with?
I guess I really want to leave all of our citizens believing that economic development is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, whether it's development services, whether it's economic development, whether it's finance. Every piece of this puzzle has to work together to create a frictionless environment that's attractive to young people who want to grow families. If we want to continue to grow and thrive, we can't be what we've always been. What we need to be is what's looking forward. And all of us are future focused. I'm looking forward to a new city manager soon, who I'm sure council will choose somebody who's just as future focused. I hope that all of our citizens will continue to be engaged. Share with us your thoughts, share with us your thinking, be a part of the solution. I see people on Nextdoor who want to be part of the problem. I encourage you to be part of the solution.
Exactly, and watching programs like this to give ourselves a gratuitous plug is a good thing because we're able to develop these concepts and talk about them a little more at length. And if you see something that interests you here today, you could get this program on demand from our Facebook page. You could share it with your friends, or you could find something else to look at. But as long as you're living in DeSoto, just know that we're concerned about what our future is and the best way to get there. And because of people like Matt Carlson, it's not a blind path. It's one with some direction.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Matt. Now, I want to stress this is our mobile edition of Facebook Live, DeSoto In-Depth. So that means that I'm going to have to turn this broadcast off. So if you think we've been at a TV set, yeah, we have. But I'm just going to walk towards the screen right now and stop it, and you'll be returned to your regularly scheduled programming. When we get things straightened out and we're back in our studio, we will see you with more. But thank you very much for tuning in, and goodbye.